Hi, lovely people. My name is Diana Muraro, and I'm the International Career Coach and I'm an International Career Mentor. Welcome to a new episode of Career Backstage. And today we're going to talk about how recruitment will look like in the next 12 months. And our special guest is Chris Redmond, who is the CEO of RedHolt. Chris, hi, and thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Diana, it's always a pleasure to work with you. I enjoyed the last podcast that we did, and I was excited for you to ask me back to this LinkedIn Live.
Yeah, exactly. That was like long time ago, 1 year. But yeah, really happy to have you back here, Chris. I will not gonna introduce you because I would love to hear more about from you. So I'm gonna leave you to introduce who is Chris. So people, I know that a lot of people actually know you, but we're gonna be really lovely to get an introduction from you yourself again.
Sure. Well, first of all, I have to apologize. As you know, I'm at our offices in Dubai at the moment, and if you can hear, it sounds as though they've started drilling. It's 8 o'clock in the evening, and it sounds as though they've started some kind of construction work on another floor. So I hope it's not creating too much background noise, Diana. Who is Chris? First of all, I always think people are people before they are their job title. So I am Chris Redmond. My wife is Amanda Holt. We run RedHolt together. We have two children, Alfie and Ronnie. They're both cheeky little guys. One of them's 2 years old. One of them is 1 year old. They're super cheeky. I am somebody who prides myself on being a global citizen. I'm deeply appreciative of other cultures. I'm constantly curious about new things. I never think that I'm the finished product. I believe that I bring value and confidence to domains like this one where people invite me to speak to them because they hope I can contribute something. I hope that I satisfy their desire to do that. And from a business perspective, I'm a business owner at RedHolt predominantly. I'm a co-founder at OTTpro.io. And I've got a number of other smaller business interests where I contribute as a non-executive director to global organizations that interest me and where I can offer them value.
Yeah. Oh, that's thank you so much for the introduction, Chris. Just would like to let know people who watch us, they can leave any comments related to recruitment in in the comments box, and we would like to actually reply to them. So before Chris, actually, we start to link how recruitment will going to look like in the next 12 months. Let's speak a little bit about the situation of the recruitment now. What kind of the current trends in the recruitment are now? And then what will going to be the trends in the next 12 months? So from your experience.
Sure. So in summary, Diana, my observations as somebody that is in the recruitment industry, has worked at managing director level for the last 10 years or so, and the last 6 of those in my own company, servicing a global portfolio of clients. I think that there are 2 main headlines. Number one, the phenomenal upward trajectory of utilization within recruitment agencies when COVID kind of settled and the global economy got used to that. There was nothing wrong with those companies from an economic perspective. It was a biological challenge that we faced, right? So when those companies came bouncing out of COVID, all of them wanted to catch up with the gap that had been created from where they wanted to be to where they were when they re-emerged. So recruitment at that point was absolutely crazy. There were a phenomenal amount of vacancies. I think if you just look at the UK statistics, the number of vacancies had never, ever been higher within the UK economy. And across the rest of our geographic footprint at RedHolt, that was a similar kind of message that I was receiving from different contacts in different geographies. Agencies were heavily utilized. Organizations wanted super fast outcomes. And I think that a lot of people said to me, wow, recruitment is an amazing space to be in at the moment. It's like money growing on trees. You know, you guys must be having a great time. Believe me, Diana, it was and still remains extremely hard, because when all of the market is fighting for available talent, you have to summon a supreme level of skills, both in terms of IQ and EQ, in order to first of all, identify candidates, but then also secure their attention and lead them into a conversation that imparts credibility and generates traction. So, and an extremely competitive horizon that was moving phenomenally fast. That was difficult. Lots of opportunity, but you need to be really fast, really succinct about the proposition you're taking to market in order to address the demand. What's going to happen in the next 12 months? Well, look, all we see on the news at the moment from analysts and people in a very qualified position to pass this kind of comment is about potential economic downturns. I was speaking last week to a chief executive of a large global organization that is backed by Goldman Sachs. So this is a significant organization with a long legacy and a big footprint. And he said to me, Chris, look, when I make the quarterly reports for the analysts, normally there's a couple of things I have to talk about to disarm fears or mitigate fear about some kind of economic turbulence or challenges. He said, normally there's a couple of things. At the moment, Chris, there's like 8 or 9 things happening. The energy crisis, cost of living crisis, volatility with the Russian situation. And he said, Chris, even if each one of those things only affects our revenue turbulence 5%, you put 8 of those things on the table, that's potentially a lot of lumpy revenue when it comes to what we're collecting and our trajectory in terms of top line and bottom line contribution in different regions. So if you extrapolate that and look at it from a recruitment perspective, it means that the recruitment market is going to get a lot cooler quite quickly. And that's exactly what I'm seeing, Diana. Companies are cooling down a lot. And one indication of that is that the crazy inflated salaries that organizations who were desperate to hire were going to market with have kind of ceased to be the case. It's normalized. It's become much more of a relative plateau. And, actually, I've seen a few organizations over the course of the last few months kind of slow down hiring significantly to the point where a few of them have stopped because they want to see what's going to happen between now and Christmas over the rest calendar year.
Yeah, Chris, and because you mentioned about attracting the right candidates or the suitable candidates. So how nowadays, and especially, companies attract the right candidates with the right skills. And when I say with the right skills, I mean more with the, soft skills, because there is a shortage of these soft skills. How actually try, companies to survive, let's say, on the market and, attract these right candidates, because it's not easy. And especially now the candidates, they have different requirements when they get a job. Like most of them, they might prefer to work, remotely rather than hybrid, because the organization say, okay, we would like you to see in the office. But some of them, they say, okay, it's fine, but I'm happy to work from home. So how obviously is covering this gap between?
So, the vocabulary you just used to describe candidates' posture on what they want was very polite and diplomatic, Diana. Candidates are much more clear and quite firm about whether or not they want to go to the office nowadays. And I've actually listened to a lot of podcasts and done analysis on this. And, one of the challenges in terms of the complexion of the market post-COVID is candidates are aware of the fact that, in a way, they hold an upper hand that they didn't really hold before. The market's distorted somewhat. And everybody's trying to get their head around what that means in terms of the power dynamic with companies that want to hire. One thing that I would say absolutely is in the same vein of what I've just mentioned around candidates having more power, organizations are having to use a lot more emotional intelligence around how they captivate people's attention enough to get them to leave their current employer and come to them. Because I think that's the kind of pivot moment that we're at the moment. A lot of people can see this cost of living crisis and all of these kind of things, and they're actually, to an extent, a little bit worried about leaving. So companies really need to offer something more than just dollars to get people to come. They need to show that they care. In terms of what candidates need to put on display, I was having this conversation with one of my own team recently, and there is a massive intangible quality that candidates need to demonstrate, I think, more than ever, if they're in a selection process for a role that they are very keen on. And this is going to sound really obvious when I say this, but actually, when you stop to think about it, it's something that you don't really discuss much, but that we're increasingly providing counsel to our candidates about. And it's likability. Number one, likability. You know, you quite often think that you're being assessed from an objective perspective, and it's your hard skills, you know, your abilities. But actually, one of the things, even if it's subconscious with the person that's interviewing you, they will be evaluating you for whether or not you are an individual that they feel as though they want to spend a lot of time around. And let's face it, even if you're not working in the same office, you are still working with people, you know, you're still interacting with them extensively. So likability is a really, really important one. I think the other, depending on what kind of part of the business you're going into, you know, there's significant differences between departments. So, for example, between accounting and business development. In accounting, as we've discussed before, Diana, you'd probably expect to see people, if we were using a psychometric evaluation like insights, who are more blue or green. In sales, you would expect people who are more red or particularly yellow, you know, networkers, people who create that kind of likable gravity. But I think, you know, if you look at generically applicable characteristics to the question around soft skills, you know, likability, definitely people who are able to articulate an objective. I'm going to do this. This is what I'm going to achieve. And this is the timescales that I'm going to aim to achieve it in. No matter what department you're in, when you're able to put your best foot forward on that type of confidence around the direction that you're headed in, I think it was always valuable anyway. But if you imagine being a manager nowadays where your team are all remote, it's good to know that you've got people who have set their own objectives, because the chances are they're going to get more wind in their sails when it comes to, you know, sailing out towards achieving that objective. I think the final one that I would offer when it comes to soft skills is the ability to be determined, both in terms of your individual contribution, as we've alluded to, but importantly as well, how you collaborate across your team, the value that you bring. It's just so important. And again, that the necessity to be effective at good collaboration, where you help your team, not just yourself, I think is only accentuated when it comes to these kind of distributed, hybrid, working from home models that we all participate in nowadays.
Yeah. So because we still talking about soft skills, Chris. So from today in the near future, around 66% of all new jobs mainly rely on soft skills, you know. So are recruiters focusing on hiring more for soft skills or hard skills, and why? I know that it depends of the industry, and also it depends of the job. But any job, let's say if 80% the job rely on hard skills, anyway, they need to have some soft skills, you know, like communication, like building great relationship across the organization, across the team, with the colleagues. So if you can share with us an example, that will going to be really great. So actually people who watch us, they can understand better.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think there's a triangulation between what you've just mentioned. There's a third point as well, which is, you know, the emphasis that different hiring managers and decision makers put on the hard skills, the abilities versus the soft skills. I would counsel any candidate to make a qualification themselves around, if they're dealing with a hiring manager, extending a question to that person around what's most important to you in how you're going to make your decision. If you're working with a good recruitment consultant, they'll be able to provide you with their interpretation of what matters to that particular hiring manager. but it's always good for the candidate to qualify that question for themselves. I think the difference here, Diana, that I notice is in technical roles such as developers and DevOps type people, the emphasis from hiring managers on soft skills is much less, but it has increased over the course of the last, 2 years, definitely. The reason that it's increased is because of the need for these people to collaborate globally quite often with other hubs that are performing either a similar operation or what we would call a handshake part of the process. So if I'm receiving something from these guys, I need to collaborate well to understand what I'm receiving, and I need to collaborate well with these guys so that they appreciate whatever I'm passing on. I think the emphasis becomes more important in, and I think this is where the 66% comes from. There's definitely an increase in sales and business development type jobs, hunting and farming. And obviously in those jobs, the soft skills that are necessary to identify opportunity, create compelling reasons so that whoever you're speaking to understands why they should purchase your product, to foster relationships and to be able to build credibility quickly. All of those things fall into a very subjective category that we commonly refer to as soft skills, right? But they are generically applicable no matter what you're selling, whether it's cars or software. All of those things become very important when you're in commercially facing roles. And I don't actually just mean sales. We hire a lot in the product space. And a lot of companies are migrating now from perpetual licensing models to software as a service models, and actually appreciating the transformation that brings, not only from a revenue accounting perspective in a business, but also in how customers interact with the nature of your product and how to deploy that within a business, is why customer success management has become so important in the SaaS chapter of business. So, I would say there's a deeper necessity for soft skills within organizations, but the emphasis is still on the appreciation of what the characteristics of the market are like, because at the end of the day we call it the market, right? But the market is just people, and it's that empathy and sympathy.
And Chris, what from your experience, what are the top soft skills that actually a recruiter looking for nowadays, in the candidates to have?
Well, look, I think that if I were a candidate now, I would evaluate myself in these 6 dimensions, right? And we literally at RedHolt call these dimensions the 6 dimensions of potential. So number 1, look at your achievements and what they suggest your soft skills are, because if the best way to predict the future is by looking at the past, if you look at your top achievements, the chances are they are what determine your strengths, right? So you can also look on the other side of that coin to interpret what your weaknesses might be. Just as a footnote to that, sometimes presenting your weaknesses confidently and acknowledging your vulnerabilities as a candidate can demonstrate a maturity and confidence, right? So number 1, achievements. Number 2, attitude. Attitude is so important. The way you articulate your attitude, no matter what job, wherever in the world, at whatever sector, at whatever level, it's really important that you're able to talk about an attractive type of attitude, right? And the comment that we always pass to candidates when we're speaking to them about attitude is that you can kind of choose your attitude minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day. When someone says to you, suck it up and get on with it, well, that's about choosing the appropriate attitude for the environment that you're about to go into, whether or not that's a meeting or a workshop or whatever. So that's number 2. Number 3, core values. These are the things that you can't change minute by minute. These are the things that are baked into us. They are hard coded into us from childhood. Yeah. So these are the characteristics. Typically, again, Diana, I know you like DISC as a psychometric evaluation. The way people act normally, but the way that can change under pressure can sometimes reveal their core values. I would also say it's important on the other side of those things. And, point number 4 here is around abilities. We're talking about soft skills here, right? But let's not underestimate the necessity to know and recognize that if you're in a selection process, you are a product, right? You are going to be an asset, literally, to your employer. So I don't think it's a bad thing to think of yourself in that way. Like, if I'm a product, what's the product spec here? What are my hard skills and what are my soft skills? So I would always advocate to any candidate, knowing what your top 3 abilities are is the tip of the spear when it comes to being able to talk about what you contribute. I think the 5th one kind of goes with the others, is around appetite. What's your appetite for what you do? And it's an important question to ask yourself as well as a candidate, because if you realize through looking in the mirror whilst you ask yourself that question that you're a little bit tired around the way that you talk about what you do and your expertise, well, maybe that's a warning flag that it's time to change it up a bit. Look left or right across the horizon of opportunities, and make sure that you're doing the right thing so that you've got appropriate levels of energy going into your opportunity. But hopefully most people will go, if my level of appetite as a candidate putting myself on the market is high, and you've answered all the other questions, then that's really good. The final dimension, the 6th dimension of potential, that I think is super important to understand in case you get asked this question, is what your career drivers are. And it kind of falls into soft skills. Some people are motivated by stability. Some people are motivated by high levels of volatility and ambiguity. It's just a fact. Some people love that. So, knowing where you sit on that spectrum is really powerful. So just to recap those 6 dimensions, Dana: achievements, attitude, core values, abilities, appetite, and career drivers. If you look across those points when you're evaluating yourself and you're able to answer those 6 questions in a crisp, confident way, the chances are you're not going to get caught off guard when you get into selection processes.
I'm so happy, Chris, that you mentioned about core values, and these values are actually in our DNA, and people obviously don't realize how important are values, the values that they have. Most of the time, for example, people, when they come to my mentoring or career coaching sessions, this is the first thing that I'm starting any session. I'm starting with this, to be honest, because they need to understand what is really important to them in their career, and they really need to understand who they are, and based on what they make any decisions in this life, professional life or personal life. And then they start kind of thinking, oh, okay, now I understand why I would like to be in that type of environment, or why I would like to work for that kind of organization. So I'm so happy that you mentioned about core values, as a soft skill, because this actually play a really huge, important role. So let's see what are the shortage of the soft skills in the market today, and what do you think will going to be the shortage of soft skills in the near future, if we can obviously kind of
look, the constant shortage in the market is every business needs people that have got an ability to do business development. That's the top of the list. That's the top of the list, because there's 2 categories of hunters. I get asked a lot, we need a hunter. We need someone that's aggressive, And I say, hunters are not always aggressive people. Sometimes they're totally the opposite, and that's why they're so effective. In my mind, and I got taught this a long time ago, there's 2 categories of hunter. And I guess you could talk about a lot of roles like this, Diana. One category is what is called a hired gun, right? They shoot from the hip, they fire bullets, everyone knows how you pull the trigger, and they knock cans off the wall. But the one that everybody wants to be is the rainmaker. The people that look at it and go, how do they do that? Like, wow. And I think that, there's something behind that level of competence where you become a rainmaker, whatever you do, that is actually, maybe it goes back to core values, Diana, but it's about deep-seated conviction and confidence about what you do and how you approach that. Now, quite often that's about being really well rehearsed and having lots of experience at what you do. But I would say one of the things that I notice about really, really successful people on the client side and within my own friends network and business networks, and when I meet candidates, one of the soft skills that I think is really important and disarming is when you meet people that are on a constant development journey. You know, they know what their vulnerabilities are, but they're not scared of them. They embrace them. They actually embrace them because they know that that's the frontier to head towards, to become stronger. You can just, if you just focus on what you're already good at, are you actually becoming any better? I'd say it's harder to become better if you're just focusing on what you're good at. You know, it's actually about going to those less comfortable places and increasing the spectrum or the horizon of different abilities and soft skills that you've got, whatever they might be, to make yourself a more compelling candidate. You know, and I'm not sure if that answers the question well enough, Diana, it's a perspective.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. So what do you think will going to be the challenges that recruiters will going to face in the next 12 months? You know, in maybe one of them can be that they can have a bunch of candidates or a pool of candidates, but not with the right, you know, skills or whatever. So what do you think from, you know, from your opinion?
There's two that spring to mind immediately, and I'm already seeing this. Number one, in the, let's say, 1 year or 18 months that we've had since COVID, a lot of the, let's say, top 25% of people, maybe even 50% of people in some disciplines have already moved. Yeah. So if you think about what that means to the talent market, the talent pool, it means that the candidates that are left are maybe harder to sell. Yeah. Maybe they're not as strong as the ones that have moved. And the ones that have already moved are not going to move again because it makes their CV look bad. So recruiters have got a harder job now to dig deeper to identify the really talented people that didn't move in the first wave and that were attracted to the big ticket salary elevations that were on offer. That's point number one. Point number two is going to be, when you do find a good candidate, really making sure that you foster a deep, trusting, high quality relationship with them so that you can guide them through a process with integrity and make sure that you appreciate where their head is and where their heart is. If you don't appreciate both of those things about a candidate, the situation that we're going into economically and, you know, post-COVID is so delicate. I see it a lot. You know, people are more trepidatious going into processes. They are more vulnerable to counter offers at the end of the process. You know, when they have to go in and resign, that tricky moment that only the candidate can do. You know, a good hiring manager will fairly easily go straight to the heart of that individual and destabilize this notion that they're going to leave. So I think there are two things just off the top of my head that recruiters are going to face challenges with over the course of the next 12 months.
And just a question just came in my mind, Chris. So companies nowadays, they hire people more who are actually passionate about that industry, or they hire people more with the right experience and expertise? What they looking more for, hiring the right people with the right experience and expertise, or for hiring the right people with the right passion, let's say, for that particular industry? You know why I'm asking this? Because obviously I noticed before people used to hire quite a lot based on expertise and on experience. But after that, some companies, they realize that, okay, that is really great that we have this experience and expertise, but when there is any challenges to embrace and you know, industries are changing, business is changing, and sometimes obviously you need to, you know, develop any other skills, but you might not be passionate about that industry. So they kind of start to, you know, focus a little bit on passion. So what is the, you know, what is the situation today?
Yeah, good, really good question. I've noticed, like you, that more companies look for passion as a higher priority in their decision-making process. I think in fact, I know the motivation for that is that quite often what senior leaders want to do, right up to chief executives, is bring in people who will passionately represent their brand in the market and internally within the business, and who bring a skill set or abilities or soft skills that cover the blind spots that they've had from a legacy perspective, and that they know they will continue to have if they just continue to recruit the same type of person over and over again. In fact, all you do there is accentuate the blind spots within your business. And, especially in digital markets, which, let's face it, Diana, most markets nowadays have got an increasing amount of influence by being digitally enabled and online presence, etc. It's important that you have got people in the business that look at your model and are able to identify ways to optimize it. And if you only recruit people who come from your competitors and have always worked in that sector, it's not their fault, but those people sometimes don't have the type of experience, exposure, scar tissue, whatever you want to call it, to actually be able to sit there and naturally create commentary and observations that brings distinct value to evolve the business model. So I think that, when they spot someone who is high potential, the next thing that they're looking for, to your point, is passion. Is this person going to sit at the table and be intellectually and emotionally engaged by the job that they've got in my team? And I think if candidates put a tick in both of those boxes, it really optimizes the probability that they're going to get the job.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Chris, because this is what I notice. Companies, they are able and they're happy to invest in developing the skills of the employees, but they really want to see that kind of passion, because the impact that the person is going to create in the business or in the organization will going to be a natural one. So what industries are in real demand nowadays? Because I know IT, it's one of them. I mean, IT always looking for candidates, but from your experience, because look, you are the CEO of RedHolt. So in which industries you hire more people?
Well, look, I would say anything that is highly orientated around digital enablement is definitely in a strong position. We saw how more traditional industries such as hospitality, maybe FMCG, and maybe engineering, mechanical and electrical engineering type industries were more affected, right? And those kind of businesses get more affected by downturns in the global economy because of currency fluctuations as well. And they're more subject to that volatility. Clearly, the provision of digital services isn't as subject to that type of fluctuation. So, one of the areas that we specialize in at RedHolt, to directly answer your question, is OTT services, over the top, such as Netflix, all of that, or the content delivery, you could call that. Everywhere that has taken off. If you look at places that don't have such advanced infrastructure, but where more and more people are getting a device in their hand and there is more opportunity to access higher speed internet, they're getting content like they could never get before. So, and there's a whole raft of skills that go into those businesses. Netflix business model has been subject to a lot of controversy recently because people unsubscribing, but that doesn't mean that that content delivery generally is going to slow down. So content, anything to do with content, we're noticing a pickup in. The other thing that I think is really interesting that I'm observing, and I think that again that this is being accelerated because of economic uncertainty, is data. Data is digital gold. Anything to do with data. If you look at the likes of Nielsen, Informa, any of these traditional market analysis type organizations that make intelligence from data, a lot of companies want that and they need that as well, because actually if it starts to become a buyer's market, it can become a race to the bottom in terms of margin competition. Nobody wants to do that. You always want to be able to talk about your product in a compelling way in terms of not the cost, but the value that it offers to defend your price point. Data is the way to do that, obviously, because it substantiates your posture on why your product offers value. So I've noticed that there's small organizations that are really super innovative, super cool when it comes to the way that they collect and analyze data to make intelligence of it. But then you've got all of the big companies as well. You know, I mentioned Informa and Nielsen, and they operate across so many sectors, and the people that they employ to analyze data are just phenomenal. There's a whole host of other sectors that I'm not as qualified to talk about, but if you look at ed tech, med tech, we know fintech, it's all about digital enablement. I think that's the next chapter of where we're going into as a population globally.
Are there enough candidates, Chris, who would like obviously work in this sector, like, you know, dealing with data, let's say?
No,
because it's a really tough process.
There isn't. There definitely isn't, Diana. And, you know, that's not exclusive to just data. You can take a much wider view of sector analysis and ask the same question, and there is not enough candidates. Fact, there just isn't. And, you know, going back to one of the first questions you asked me around the challenges that recruiters face and therefore organizations, you know, we inherit the challenges that our clients face because they're trying to run their businesses. We're supposed to be the subject matter experts on how to identify and attract these people for them. That's why they pay what they do to organizations like mine. But when there's a lack of people, and we're not just talking about people, we're talking about interested people, you know, the challenge becomes, how do you ignite the interest of the uninterested people? And that Diana, is where we turn to one of my favorite topics, which is, instead of just the science of recruitment, the art of recruitment, you know. And people quite often nowadays think that it's all about LinkedIn and just digital stuff. And you know that I love that, Diana. You know me really well, and you know that I love all of the digital stuff. But actually being a really outstanding recruiter is about understanding the art of recruitment.
Exactly. So, Chris, we obviously tackled this a little bit before, but I would like to ask you if there is any gap between what actually employers offer to candidates and what are the candidates' needs. If you can share with us an example.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question totally.
There is a gap between what employers offer and what are the needs of the candidate. Is there a gap, or this kind of things somewhere on the road they need to know?
I understand. Look, it goes back to the point we were talking about earlier. You know, I think people have got a much more healthy appreciation for their own, the importance of their own mental health nowadays. I also think that people realize that a lot of employers will say that's important, but actually, you know, the bottom line might be more important, and therefore the way that employers are treated, engaged, driven, sometimes, you know, you can see that. I'll give you a good example, Diana. One of the podcasts about the working from home thing in the US, they did an analysis, and what they found was that a couple of really important things. Number one, the executives had said to their staff, we expect you to be in the office 2 or 3 days a week. And most of the people at junior to mid-levels abided by that, right? They adhered to the request. The executives didn't. You know, the executives take it upon themselves not to do that. Now, you imagine what the polarization that starts to create in an organization structure when the perception of the guys that are making their way in go, where's the leaders? Where's the executives? That's number one. Number two, the workers started to find that if they didn't adhere to it, the junior to mid-level people, and they just started to come in once or twice a week, maybe not even that, no one was enforcing it. Yeah, nobody was there to actually, number one, observe or take note of that. And number two, to say you must do this, or there is a consequence of non-compliance. So it's really interesting, right? Because I think that stuff like this, we're still trying to get our head around. And what I think, therefore, the answer to the question, the gap with employers and what they need to demonstrate with their actions more than just their words is, some of these things around how they care for the mental health of their employees and how they address some of the things that have been historic anomalies like diversity and inclusion, where it does take time to address it, but there are ways that companies can evidence that they are doing so and that they care about doing that. And sometimes even if companies don't get that right, I think if you look at more modern cultures within businesses, what people love is when they see leaders that try. Don't always need to be successful, but people like to see leaders that are not complacent and that make the effort to try and do the things that they should do, or to do new things, or both. And I think that, that's some of the gap that people are looking for nowadays. It's, although we're more distributed as a workforce, actually, I think that there is a greater opportunity than ever to generate intimacy and proximity between leaders and the staff by digital methods. So, you only have to look at the videos on LinkedIn and all that sort of stuff. You can be extremely open as a leader nowadays, and there's a lot of tools that help you achieve that. And I think that goes a long way towards people feeling as though they're close to their boss or close to their manager. That actually helps them feel as though they want to contribute more.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the challenge for leaders is how to lead a multi-generational workforce. Also, because different generations, they have different expectations, and the way how they actually been accustomed to work and have different habits. So it's really tricky. But also, I know people who, obviously, from a candidate perspective, I know people who would like to work like 4 days a week rather than 5 days. But some employers need you 5 days, let's say, to work for them. And also is like a gap between what actually employer is offering and what actually candidate need. And I remember in the pandemic, when started the pandemic, I used to work for a pension company back in the UK in that time. And I remember that, our employees obviously needed, for example, a table, need a special space at home, and they didn't have to work when when we moved to remotely working. And we, as an employer, we didn't notice that. Some people didn't have a normal chair, so that was also a need. But we didn't notice this until people ask us, do you offer this? Do you offer a furniture? Do you offer, a chair or desk? Yeah.
It's really interesting, Diana, because I remember in the pandemic, one of my contacts is the SVP for EMEA for a big organization, multi-billion-dollar organization, and he reports into the founder in the US. And he was emotionally affected by the things that he was finding out about the personal circumstances of his senior leaders, as well as the people that reported into them. When people start to work from home, he didn't even realize that one of his direct reports was a single mom. Now, she's a very, very senior person on a massive salary and doing extremely well for herself professionally, but we're all humans, right? And, any single parent, agnostic of what your gender is going to be juggling a lot of stuff. So, it gave him quite a deep appreciation for some of the challenges that his team had got that he would never have really realized before, because she would have traveled to the office, smart, professional, done what she needs to do, and then come back home to, the kids and the personal circumstances. But, there was such a whole host of things. And I think that the residual effect of some of the harder realities that leaders had to embrace in the pandemic is a positive thing, actually, because, you appreciate the importance of knowing people beyond just their presence in the office. And, the cat walking across the keyboard situation and the kids coming in screaming behind, I actually think it gave good leaders the opportunity to be a bit on a level with their staff and just laugh at things, rather than being this kind of hierarchy that we were more familiar with traditionally. I'm glad that's gone.
So our podcast is coming to end, Chris. And the last question that I would like to ask you, what do people need to retain from our interview? Like, like a really short summary at the end. That will going to be really helpful.
Well, look, I would offer the 6 dimensions of potential as a way to evaluate yourself. You're excellent when it comes to the work that you do with the people who work with you, Diana, on the psychometric evaluation and how they should interpret that. But if somebody at whatever degree of regularity wants to do a spot check on themselves and they want to look at, what are my achievements? What's my attitude? What's my core values, my abilities, my appetite, and my career drivers? There are 6 questions that you can ask yourself that will give you insightful answers to where you might need to focus, but also, importantly, in the context of this interview, what other people will interpret from you as a candidate when they're interviewing you. So if you can cover those things, as I said before, I think you're likely to develop a very solid base of responses to the kind of questions that you're going to get asked in a selection process.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris, for coming to Career Backstage. We would like to hear more about recruitment, so we will gonna wait for you to come back to the Career Backstage.
It's always a pleasure. It's an
yeah.
honor. And the stuff that you're doing whenever we speak as well, Diana, as a compliment and recognition to you, I like the innovative way that you think and the way that you work with the people that choose to work with you. So you're very kind and generous to me in your comments, but that's a reciprocal feeling.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. So thank you so much once again and it's a really nice to have you here at Career Backstage. And I will gonna see you in 2 weeks' time. Thank you so much. Have a great evening ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much.